I'm 31 now, and this happened just a few months ago. I got married in April, spring wedding, small town church, cherry blossoms, and everything. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. It almost was. But then my mom vanished halfway through the reception. She didn't storm out. There wasn't a fight. She just disappeared. At first, we thought maybe she wasn't feeling well. She has these awful migraines sometimes, and stress can trigger them. She'd been a little tense leading up to the wedding, not angry or anything, just sort of distracted. Like her head was somewhere else. When she didn't come back after an hour, my cousin went looking for her car. It was gone. I tried calling, straight to voicemail. My dad wasn't much help either. He just shrugged and said she probably went home early, but the way he said it was weird. Like he was trying too hard to sound casual. My mom doesn't just leave like that. Especially not without saying goodbye to me. Her only daughter. On my wedding day. I should have known something was wrong right then, but I told myself to let it go. It was my wedding. I wanted to be happy. So I pushed it aside and danced and drank and laughed like everything was fine. That night, I checked her location on the family app. It had been turned off. It's been on 24/7 for the past 4 years, ever since my brother got into a car accident and my mom became a total safety hawk. She always said she wanted us to be traceable, just in case. And now, suddenly, her location was gone. That was the first real red flag. But the second came a week later, when I went to her house to return something, and she didn't answer the door. I knew she was inside. Her car was there, lights on, music playing from the kitchen window. I rang the bell for 10 minutes straight before my dad finally opened it. He looked like hell. He said she was asleep. At 4 p.m. I didn't believe him. And that was just the beginning. I didn't buy it. There was no way my mom was asleep in the middle of the day with the kitchen music blaring and the blinds drawn. And the way my dad stood in the doorway, blocking my view of the hallway behind him? That wasn't nothing. That was intentional. I told him I just wanted to drop off the necklace she let me borrow for the wedding. He hesitated, then stepped aside. Said I could leave it on the kitchen counter. The house felt off. Like it had been frozen in time. My mom always kept it spotless, candles burning, throw blankets folded, plants watered. But the air was stale. The flowers in the entryway vase were wilted. Dishes were stacked in the sink, and the trash can was overflowing. My mom would never let that happen. I left the necklace on the counter but didn't walk straight out. I lingered. Quietly. I wanted to hear something, anything, from the back of the house. A cough, a footstep, her voice. Nothing. Then I noticed the closet door in the hallway. The one by the laundry room. It was slightly open, just a crack. It was supposed to be empty. A few months before the wedding, my mom did a massive spring purge. She turned that closet into a minimalist dream, 3 extra towels and a small shelf for detergent. I helped her do it. But now? It was full again, stuffed. I looked over my shoulder. My dad had gone back into the living room, and I quietly opened it the rest of the way. Inside were boxes. Cardboard, unmarked, stacked almost to the ceiling. On top of them was something I hadn't seen in years, my mom's old laptop bag. The one she stopped using after she retired. I don't know why, but my heart started racing. I wasn't supposed to see any of this. I was sure of it. Then, behind one of the boxes, I spotted a leather purse. Not just any purse. My mom's wedding clutch. The exact one she had with her on my wedding day. So why was it here? I don't even know what made me do it. It's like my hands moved before my brain could catch up. I reached in, pulled the purse down, and opened it right there on the laundry room floor. It was heavier than I remembered. Not from makeup or keys or a phone, none of that was inside. Just an envelope. It was thick, sealed, and unmarked. No address, no name, nothing. Just plain white and slightly bent at the corners, like someone had been carrying it around for a while. I shouldn't have opened it. I know that now. But at the time, it felt like I had to. My mom had left my wedding without a word. She disappeared. And now I was standing in her house, in front of a hidden stash of boxes, with a sealed envelope in her wedding purse. So yeah, I tore it open. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Old ones, mostly. Black and white, then some that looked like they were from the 90s. And then, more recent. Much more recent. One photo stopped me cold. It was of a man I didn't recognize, maybe in his 60s, gray hair, beard, standing beside a small cabin in what looked like a forest. In his hand, he held a letter. The edges were curled and worn. The only reason I even noticed it? I'd seen that same letter before. In my mom's desk drawer. Years ago. I kept flipping through the stack, my breath getting shallower with every picture. They were all of that man. Different seasons, different clothes. Sometimes he was outside the cabin, sometimes sitting by a car, sometimes just looking straight into the lens like he knew he was being watched. The last picture in the pile was different. It was a picture of my mom, standing next to him. Her hand was on his chest. She was smiling. He was too. The date stamp in the corner? Exactly 1 month before my wedding. I was still kneeling there, completely numb, when I heard my dad's voice from the living room. He called my name once. Then again, sharper. And I realized I hadn't closed the closet door. I shoved the pictures back into the envelope so fast I crumpled one of the corners. Slammed the purse shut, pushed it behind the boxes, yanked the closet door closed just as I heard footsteps creaking down the hallway. I stood up straight, pretending to examine a stupid framed picture of hydrangeas on the wall, like I hadn't just uncovered some hidden chapter of my mother's life. My dad rounded the corner. His expression was calm, too calm. He looked at me with that forced smile he used to give when I got in trouble as a kid and he was trying to stay patient. He asked me what I was doing back there. I told him I thought I heard Mom's voice. I even tilted my head like I was still listening, acting confused. I don't know what I expected, panic, anger? But he didn't flinch. He just said, "Nope, no one's back there. Like I told you, she's asleep. She's not feeling well." Except now his eyes were locked onto mine. Not angry. Not guilty. Just empty. It was the most unsettling thing I'd ever seen. Like he was trying to hold up a mask, but underneath it, there was nothing. I asked if she'd been to the doctor. He said yes, of course, just a flu bug. She's resting. She'll call you tomorrow. I asked if she'd gotten my thank you card. The one I mailed after the wedding. He paused. Too long. Then said, yeah. She cried when she read it. She hadn't. Because I'd slipped it into her purse, the very same one in the closet. That's when I realized something else. Something worse. He hadn't even asked me to stay. Hadn't offered to let me check on her. No food, no tea, no small talk. My dad was treating me like an outsider in my own childhood home. Like I didn't belong there anymore. So I left, walked to the car with my heart hammering and my head spinning. And when I looked back at the house, just once before pulling out of the driveway, the curtain in the upstairs bedroom moved. That curtain movement haunted me. I drove home with one hand clenched around the steering wheel and the other clutching my phone like it might suddenly reveal the truth if I stared at it long enough. I kept replaying the whole visit in my head. My dad's weird calm. The missing thank you card. The purse stuffed behind boxes. The man in the photos. And the biggest question of all. Who the hell was he? I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak in my apartment made me sit up straight. Around 3 a.m., I sat on the floor with my laptop and dumped everything I remembered from the photos into a search bar. Older man cabin, northern woods, bearded, that sort of thing. Obviously, it got me nowhere. But then I remembered something. Last Christmas, I'd bought my mom a keychain GPS tracker for her solo hiking trips. She acted like it was overkill at the time, but she still clipped it to her backpack. The best part? It was connected to my Find My app. I hadn't checked it in months. I opened the app on autopilot, not expecting much. Maybe it had long been disabled like her phone location. But when it loaded, I nearly dropped my phone. It was on. The pin was moving. Slowly. About 120 miles away, in the middle of a forest preserve near the state border. Not near any hiking trail I recognized. Not even close to where she usually went. Just remote, isolated, and familiar. The shape of the road winding into the trees, the cabin tucked just off the dirt lane, it matched the background in those photos. The man. The letter. Her. I stared at the screen like it might vanish. Then I made a decision. I was going. No calls. No texts. No warning. I didn't care if it was 4:30 in the morning. I needed answers. And that tracker had just led me straight into the secret my mom clearly never intended for me to find. I drove for 3 hours through winding back roads and thick fog that felt like it had crawled out of a horror movie. I didn't stop for gas. Didn't stop for coffee. I barely even blinked. All I had was the pin on my phone and the address I scribbled from the satellite map. When I turned down the narrow dirt path, my headlights caught the shape of a small cabin ahead, dark wood, moss on the roof, surrounded by pine trees leaning in like they were eavesdropping. It was exactly the one from the photos. My stomach dropped. There was a car parked outside, one I didn't recognize. Old, beat up. Oregon plates. I stepped out slowly. The air was cold and damp, and my boots crunched louder than I wanted them to. The closer I got to the front steps, the more my heart pounded in my ears. I had no idea what I expected to find. My mom? The man? Both. But when I knocked, the door opened almost instantly. And it wasn't either of them. A woman stood there. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Red hair tied up, flannel shirt, jeans. She didn't look surprised. She didn't ask who I was. She just stared at me like she already knew. Then she said, "You look just like her." That's when my blood turned cold. I asked her who she meant. She said, "Deborah. Your mother." I didn't remember telling her my name. I didn't remember saying anything yet. I asked where my mom was. She said, "Not here." I asked when she left. She said, 3 days ago. That made no sense. The GPS showed the tracker was still here. I asked about that, too. And her face didn't move when she answered. She left the bag. Probably didn't realize the keychain was still attached. Then she turned, walked back into the cabin, and left the door open behind her. Like she expected me to follow. And I did. Because nothing about any of this was okay. I stepped into the cabin like I was walking into a memory I didn't know I had. It smelled like cedar and dust. There were no lights on, just the gray morning creeping in through half-open blinds. The woman, who still hadn't told me her name, walked straight into the living room and sat down like it was her house. Maybe it was. I stayed standing. The silence stretched. My heartbeat was louder than my footsteps. Then I noticed the photos. They were pinned up along the back wall, some framed, most just tacked onto corkboard. It was like a shrine. Dozens of them. Some black and white, some printed on cheap glossy paper. All of them had one thing in common. My mom was in nearly every single one. In some, she looked my age. Others were clearly more recent. But in every photo, she was with the same man. The bearded one from the envelope. Always close. Always smiling. Sometimes they were hiking, sometimes sitting on a dock, once even holding hands at what looked like a Christmas dinner. They looked like a couple. A real one. I turned to the woman, finally choking out the words that had been clawing at my throat since I stepped out of the car. "Who is he?" She looked up at me, slowly. Then she said, "Your mother called him James. But his real name was Alan. He died last week." The room spun. I asked, was he her, what? Her boyfriend? Her friend? And the woman? She gave the smallest nod. Then said, "He was my father." I staggered back a step like she'd slapped me. Because that wasn't possible. Unless my mother had been hiding something much, much bigger than just a secret cabin romance. I don't even remember how I sat down. 1 minute I was standing there, trying to hold it together, and the next I was sinking into a worn leather armchair, heart racing, skin buzzing like my body knew something before my brain did. She said it again. Slower this time. "Alan was my father. Deborah, your mom, was with him for almost 20 years. Off and on." I just stared at her. The room suddenly felt too small. My mother had been married to my dad for over 3 decades. I grew up watching them dance in the kitchen, argue over movie choices, laugh about absolutely nothing. That was real. Wasn't it? She must have seen the disbelief on my face because she reached behind the bookshelf and pulled out a faded envelope, the edges soft with time. It had my mom's handwriting on it. Instantly recognizable. Loopy, elegant. The kind she only used when she wanted something to matter. It was addressed to me. But it was never sent. She handed it over like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "I found this last week, in a drawer under his bed. With the photos. I didn't know who you were until I googled the name on the return address. Saw a wedding post on your cousin's Facebook. Saw the resemblance. I couldn't breathe. My name. On that envelope. In my mom's handwriting. Sitting here, in a dead man's cabin, delivered to me by a woman who had just called him father." I tore it open with shaking hands. The letter was dated March 10th, 5 weeks before the wedding. My mom wrote that there were things she could no longer carry alone. That she'd made choices, ones I was never supposed to find out about. That there had been another man. Not a fling, not a mistake, but someone she loved. Loved deeply. Enough to keep visiting for 2 decades, in secret. Enough to have another life. And then she wrote this. "You have a sister. I never told you." I was trying to protect everyone, but I see now that lies don't protect anyone. They just grow teeth. I looked up at the woman across from me. She didn't have to say it. I already knew. She was my sister. And my mom, who had vanished without a trace, had left this letter behind like breadcrumbs to a truth I was never supposed to eat. I didn't speak for a long time. Just sat there holding the letter like it might catch fire if I blinked too hard. The woman, my sister, didn't push me. She just watched me with this tired kind of understanding, like she'd lived this truth for years and knew what it did to someone. When I finally found my voice, it came out small. Where is she? She didn't answer right away. Just stood up, walked into the kitchen, and came back with a small notebook, tossed it onto the table between us. Inside was a list of dates, scribbled notes, initials. My mom's handwriting again. At the bottom, one line was underlined twice. April 28th, leaving. No goodbyes. It's the only way. I stared at it. April 28th, 2.5 weeks after my wedding. The day my mom officially stopped responding to calls and messages. The day she shut off her bank account. The day she disappeared, for good. She hadn't gone missing. She'd planned it. She chose to vanish, and she didn't want to be found. But the question that chewed through me was why? Why now? Why after everything? My sister answered it without me having to ask. She didn't leave because of Alan. She stayed until he died. She told me once, if he ever passed, she'd go somewhere no one knew her name. Said she couldn't live in two halves anymore. My voice cracked when I asked where. That's when she pulled out a burner phone. Said it hadn't rung in days, but she had one last voicemail. Left on the morning of April 29th. She played it. It was my mom's voice, shaky, worn, but still hers. She said she was safe, that she was going somewhere quiet, far, that she needed to finally be whole, and that meant letting go of every piece of the life she'd stitched together out of guilt. Then, right before the beep ended the message, she said, "Tell her I love her. Both of them. But she'll only understand if she lets go of the version of me she thought she knew." I didn't cry. Not right away. Because the truth hadn't even finished unraveling. And what I learned next? It made everything worse. When I got back home, I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I didn't call anyone. I sat on the couch with the letter in my lap and that voicemail playing on a loop in my head. My mom didn't disappear because she was ashamed of having a secret family. She left because she finally could. The weight of that realization felt like a boulder pressing against my chest. I didn't tell my dad where I'd been. Not right away. I watched him for a few days, studied him like I was seeing him for the first time. The calm, collected way he asked about my husband. The easy way he told jokes, like nothing was fractured. And that's when it clicked. He knew. He had to have known about Alan. The photos, the notes, the woman in the cabin, none of it was new. My dad hadn't just been surprised at the wedding. He'd been expecting her to vanish. He didn't panic. He didn't file a report. He didn't even act like she was really gone. Because this wasn't his first time watching her leave. So I waited until I had him alone. One night, after dinner. He was cleaning the dishes, humming to himself like everything was fine. I asked him straight out, "How long have you known?" The humming stopped. He didn't look at me. Just dried his hands and leaned on the counter, silent. Then he said, "Since the beginning." My stomach dropped. He told me that early in their marriage, she confessed. Said she had feelings for someone else. That she'd tried to end it, but couldn't. She promised to never let it interfere with our family. And my dad? He agreed to stay. On one condition. She had to keep it secret. Completely. Forever. He didn't want the shame. The mess. The questions. He didn't want me, or anyone, finding out. So they made a pact. He'd stay. She could visit, as long as it never touched our lives. As long as I never knew. He said it was for me. To give me a normal life. A whole family. No scandal. But I didn't feel protected. I felt robbed. All those years of thinking we were the perfect little family, the holiday photos, the matching pajamas, the stupid Christmas card rhymes. It was all scripted. Built on her silence. His conditions. Their lie. And now she was gone. She'd kept her promise. For 31 years. And when the man she loved died, when there was nothing left tethering her here, she finally left, too. She chose freedom over pretending any longer. I asked my dad one last question. "Do you even miss her?" He looked at me, completely calm. And said, "No one ever really misses what they never fully had." That was the last time I spoke to him. I packed up the letter, the envelope, and the last piece of the life I thought I understood. And I drove back to the forest. I don't know if I'll find her again. I don't even know if she wants to be found. But I do know one thing now. My mother didn't leave me. She left the version of herself that had to hide. And honestly, I think I would have done the same.